Hey, what's going on, everybody? Just wanted to first off thank all 720 of you that has subscribed since the beginning of this channel. It's really awesome. Shout out to Mama D, because it wouldn't happen without her. If you don't know who Mama D is, that's a nickname for my mom, Darlene Michaud. Sometimes we call her Mama Darlene. I'm gonna start a new movement and call her Mama D. Hi, Mom. I know you're watching. In effort to bring this channel to more present times, I need to give more context on a few more things. As the channel develops and becomes very present, I will still do some videos where I'm like, hey, let me tell you a story about times in Nashville when I lived there, or what have you. The main purpose for this channel is to have an outlet for current life, good and bad, ugly, indifferent. Like I said earlier, I need to set up some stories first. The first one being my business. Shelby Row Productions is the business name, but my forward-facing brand is SRP Studios Podcasting. And I bring this up because currently there are some struggles and some decisions being made that I want to process through. But first I want to set context on what the business is and how I got into it. Next video will be about the Rhythm Section podcast, which any of you that was following my main page or my original channel knows about this show. But it's critical to where my business is, studio is, my mindset, my heart, soul, everything about what I do for a living ties in with the story behind the business, what it is, and what the Rhythm Section podcast has done for me. Now, with all that said, SRP Studios Podcasting. I started in 2018, January of 2018. I found this website called Upwork.com, where entrepreneurs can set up a profile for whatever it is they do: graphic designing, audio editing, video editing, marketing, virtual assistant, whoever. And then they can go to job feeds, where now there are businesses posting job openings or gigs. It's much more for the gig economy, for those freelancers out there looking for work. And then businesses that aren't looking to hire someone full-time, they need some quick graphic designing for a project of some form. And then they go to Upwork.com, and then they can find all the graphic designers, where the entrepreneur, freelancer can then go to these job feeds and put in bids for jobs. So I came across that. Actually, in late 2017 is when I found it. It took a couple months to finally get a client, and I did. And it was awesome. My first client, editing, simple audio editing, some simple video editing, making $30 a week. But it was great because I needed a new hustle to add to the pile, because I was also a musician at the time. I was playing in Mackenzie's Mill, which was a Nashville-based band, Derek Joseph, and in church. I was playing a church in Hernando called Christ Covenant. And then on top of all that, I drove for Uber and Lyft. I hosted trivia nights for Challenge Entertainment, which was it had several locations, like a little franchise. Pile all that together, and I was still poor. Leading into finding Upwork.com, I Googled work from home. That was the bar that I set, anything to work from home. Came across the website, learned how it works, started searching, got that first client January of 2018. And it quickly became my obsession. I was like, okay, let's try to get a second one. And I just push, got a second client, then a third client. Now it became my main focus. All my effort went into this new world of podcasting. As it kept growing, I would eliminate a side hustle. The first one to go is the trivia stuff. And I lost money, but it gave me more time to focus on this podcast world. That was the rhythm I was in until mid 2019. I realized in order to really scale up and grow this thing, because by that point I had a nice chunk of clients, a nice little client base, and was maxing out. There's only so many hours in a week. I'm trying to balance all these side hustles, and I want to do podcasting. At this point, this is what I want to do. This is what I'm going to continue to grow. So I decided to start an LLC, make it an official business. 2019, June of 2019, it became an LLC, and I hired my first editor and immediately started giving him some podcasts, which in a way gave up money. So now I'm personally making less money, but the process is the more bandwidth I can open up gives me time to work on the business, bring more clients in, and then feed that editing over to, at the time, my first editor. His name was PJ, with the notion that eventually the business will be doing more editing than I could have handled alone anyway. And then of course the profit margin is there, and scale up that way. Meanwhile, still shaving off side hustles. And by the time COVID hit, all I had left was my church band. Now this time I'm in a different church, a place called Grace Valley in Cordova. Actually was their what's called backline director, a leadership role to make sure the drummer and guitar player and keyboard player were doing their thing. Meanwhile, the worship leader handled the front line. It was 4 singers up front, and he was there coaching them and working out harmonies, where I was behind working on the band, making sure everyone was doing what they needed to do. But by that time, I was so burnt out with playing. I was kind of over it at that point. So I was there just because it was decent money, quite honestly. Then COVID hits, and I decide it's time to be done with music. Was finally done playing music. I didn't have any other side hustles. The business was self-sustaining, and then now growing, because everyone's home, nothing to do. The ones fortunate enough to still have employment or getting the unemployment checks, or they weren't losing loved ones. There was a lot of people out there that were a little more comfortable, where they had some spending money and a ton of free time, and they just decided to start a podcast. There were businesses that looked at podcasting as a way to be able to better communicate with their business, their team, their people. Zoom exploded. Zoom became a household name. Everyone's starting to use Zoom, so businesses jump on that, and then they realize they can record conversations. They record any kind of information they want to get to their team, and then realize, well, maybe podcasting would work for us. Here we go, off and running. And in a year where there was so much loss in 2020, that's when my business just jumped up another level, and it was exciting. It was just a weird time. I think we all know how weird COVID was. But so at this point, every year has been better than the last. 2018 was that startup, just kind of getting involved as a freelancer. 2019, I become an actual licensed business. 2020, now it is scaling up. By this time, I have a handful of editors. I don't edit anymore. At this point, I'm done editing, and I can just push everything I need to my team, and then giving me more time to continue to work on the business. 2021, better than 2020. 2021 is now when I moved to Hernando, Mississippi. Now this is critical because this is where the Real Hernando podcast comes into play. Maybe a fuller, more in detail story about that podcast can be down the road, but it's still critical to mention here, because how do I grow my business locally? How do I tap into the marketplace? I don't have a studio. This is my apartment. This is the corner. This is my studio, my office/studio that I only had. On the other side of this camera is my bed. Okay, so, but how do I become a local business when not having a brick and mortar? How do I get discovered? How do I get seen? So I looked at this podcast for Hernando as a way to solve those problems. So long story short, we call it the Real Hernando, and I build a website, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube channel, Apple, Spotify, all the channels. I start interviewing local businesses. That starts and launches in February of 2022. And it worked. It really started putting me out in the forefront. I joined the chamber. And then I start becoming an active chamber member where I go to ribbon cuttings, show up and help, but I know it's also networking, giving myself visibility. And before long, it was like, hey, you're the podcast guy, right? But they were making the connection, but they still didn't know that it was part of my living. They just thought I was someone with a job and then had this hobby on the side called the Real Hernando, which was not the case. I was absolutely building it to a point where I could eventually get it sponsored. As 2022 is growing, I'm getting more and more connected. I'd always dreamt of having a studio, right? That's the natural progression in what it is I do. Eventually you want a studio. That way you can have people renting your space, or someone local that wants to start their own podcast, and now I'm their producer and editor, but now I have a place for them to record. It just makes sense. And then at some point I start looking and I don't find anything. The few spots I do find are just too big. Until one day I'm pulling up to our square. Skylar says, hey Dad, look, and she points up and there's a building adjacent from us, or diagonal from us. It's a 3-story building, and there's a big white vinyl sign, leasing space available, or whatever it said, with a big phone number. I was like, I didn't know that was there. I don't know if he just put the sign up, but thanks to Skylar, she made me look up and see it. I'm like, wow, okay, let me call that number and see what they have. And it's in a beautiful building in a beautiful part of Hernando, right off the town square. I call. Immediately, just in that phone conversation, when I learned the square footage of the room and the rate, I'm like, okay, I can make this work without even seeing it. And when I go to see it and look at it, I went with checkbook in hand, because I knew if I walk into this room, it's in good condition, and I can just tell this is something I can work with. I'm getting it. I am capitalizing on this. I'm taking the plunge. I'm cannonballing life, whatever you want to call it. And sure enough, bam, it was a great room. I'm like, I want it. And he's like, you got it. And signed a 2-year lease. In the fall of 2022, I'm walking down my hallway, and across the hall from my room, there's another room, and the door's open. And I peek in, and it's empty, and it's this beautiful corner office. And I'm just looking at it. It's bigger than the room I have. Immediately just visualize what I can do with it. And I'm like, yeah, I think I want this room. So I call the office, tell them, hey, I want that room across the hall. They're like, great, you can have it. And they cut me a deal. They helped me out. He meaning Dale Wilson, the building owner and lease manager, took $100 off each room, broke the lease, signed a brand new one, and didn't charge me a security deposit for the second room. So I'm like, yeah, this is meant to be. And that lease then started brand new on January of 23. And here we are. It's August 2024. The studio lease is coming up in a few months. And it's been a struggle. It's been ups, downs, 1 step forward, 2 steps back. It's been interesting. I've met a lot of cool people. Leading into 2023, the Chamber of Commerce reached out to me to see if I'd be interested in joining the board of directors. I was like, that's cool, yeah. So I applied, interviewed, nominated, voted. Bam, I got in. But through that, I'm meeting people. I joined a business network group called BNI, which stands for Business Network International. It's a weekly meeting that you have with other industries and professions, where you try to build relationships and referral relationships. So if I hear someone that needs a plumber, and then I go to my network chapter group and we have a plumber in there, so I say, hey Billy Bob, my friend over here, Jehoshaphat, needs a plumber. And I connect Billy Bob and Jehoshaphat, and bam, they get done. And I've helped a brother of mine out in the chapter in hopes that if they hear of a business that says, hey, Derek can help you with marketing your business and promoting your business, they send that person to me. That's how that works. Between that and the chamber, I'm meeting a lot of people. I'm having a lot of meetings in the studio. Some of those connections did lead to work. Going into 2023, the Real Hernando officially has a sponsor, Wesley Meadows Retirement Community. And they jumped on board, and they like what it's about. They like what it supports. So they jumped on it as our title. And other businesses followed suit. So the Real Hernando has been doing okay. I could use more focus on it to try to get more sponsors, but we'll be talking about all of that stuff down here in the next few videos. But that is the quick timeline of where SRP Studios started and where it is now, in a position where I have to make a lot of big decisions on the future. But next video, I have to talk about the Rhythm Section podcast and that story before truly getting present. Be on the lookout for that. Again, to all of you that have liked, subscribed, thank you. I appreciate you. It's good to be back. I hope to do more. The past few days have been busy, but I forced myself down to sit here and do this. So I hope you all have a great day, and I will talk to you next time.